Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and today we're looking at pendulums. Now, Mother Stars requested a video about pendulums. I have a couple little pieced ones, but I figure I'd just do one with basic information and just kind of time for a fresh one, right? So as you can see, these are the pendulums that I have in my collection, and you can see that they come in a variety of different sizes and shapes, and well, these are mostly all the same shapes, but don't let in this situation, the old adage that size doesn't matter definitely holds true. Like, this is obviously my very biggest pendulum, and I absolutely love it. It stays on this pendulum board that Miss Moore, which we'll talk more about the board. You can get these different kinds of pendulum boards and such. We'll get back to that in a minute, but this is obsidian, and it is a big piece of obsidian, but this is not a super strong reader for me, and neither is this little one. So they both work. I've never had any issue with the pendulum working right away with me or resonating working, but these don't have a real strong swing to them, and so size does not necessarily matter, is my point. This little, which is fairly small, it's the smallest, second smallest one I have, which is made out of amethyst, is very strong, and so you really can't tell based off of that. I do think sometimes you can't help but buy pendulums online, but it does really help when you can pick them up and work with them. So the ones that I have are all made out of crystals or stone, or other than this one copper one that I got specifically for chakra working, which is really cool, and that's really all that I use that for. Again, we'll come back to uses. This one is a gorgeous one made out of amethyst with a little amethyst ball on the bottom that I was gifted, and I said this is a really strong reader. This one, I love all the facets on this one. Look, see all the little sides? I don't know if you can see that, but it's very faceted, and it has a chakra sewn set on of beads on the chain. This was also, these were a lovely gift as well, and this reads quite well as well for not being a super large one. Actually, it's not too much longer than the amethyst one. This is the first one that I ever had, my very first pendulum, and this is one I purchased at you can often get these at little yoga stores. I got this at a yoga store that has some has some stones in it, and they have a whole bunch of pendulums, and I love this because of the inclusions. So this one reads quite strongly for me. This was my very first one, and I bought this in person. I also bought this copper one at a health food store, and bought that in person. This was maybe $6 or $7. It's all copper. This was between $12 and $15. You can generally, I've seen you go on Etsy, you can generally get a lot of different types of stoned pendulums for in the $15 price range, so they're not terribly pricey. Now, of course, you don't have to even have a pendulum. You can use anything that dangles. So, although you really kind of need a little bit of a weight at the end, so that can be a necklace. I have this necklace here. I'm not a big necklace wearer, but I have some that I absolutely love, of course. And so, like, this is a necklace that obviously it's a little bit easier because it actually has a crystal on here. So I can not only wear this as a beautifulness, but then I would actually have a pendulum to be able to use. And this one actually works well for me. For whatever reason, amethyst is quite strong as a pendulum, I have personally found. You can also use, I'm trying to pull what I have like right by me. The other thing you could use is a regular necklace. Like, this is my beautiful moon necklace. This is Michael's moon. on his birth. And so this is just a regular necklace, right? It's got, that's your weight and that's your chain, and you can simply use that for a pendulum. You can just take a chain and put a ring around, loop a ring through it. So you don't have to have one of these kinds of pendulums in order to make this work. There are other ways to make things, very simply. It can be a piece of string with a weight tied on it. That's all you need, is something that is going to provide a weight and provide a swing, right? So that's the basics there. These are my pendulums that I use, but you can use just about anything that has a weight and a swing. So we'll leave it there. So that's like kind of an overview of pendulums. I have this lovely little, I found this at Hobby Lobby for, $2.50 or something ridiculous once I used a coupon on it. And I love this because it sits over here on my reading table and they're all right there. This one, this big guy here, sometimes is on here, but I usually have him up on my bookshelf where this is with my Raven, my Edgar Allan Poe corner, I call it. So that's usually there, but sometimes it's just laying right in front because he's a big one. People have thought rude things about this particular pendulum. We won't even go there today. But that brings us to what pendulum mats and boards. Now, you don't need one, right? Generally, for the most part, I am usually doing pendulum work just off of the table like this, or off of cards. That's generally what I'm doing mine off of, and we'll get to how I use pendulums momentarily. However, you can use these wonderful, I love this. So this almost has, as you can see, a look of like a Ouija board or a spirit board. You have the alphabet, although to me, spelling out a word with a pendulum seems extremely tedious, but I've never done it, but that's okay. You also have numbers here. Yes, no, maybe, and don't know. Now, this obviously isn't everybody, and we're going to get to kind of activating your pendulum in a minute, but everybody doesn't have those same things. But this actually works for me because, and I am just doing this. This is not me showing you yet. We'll get to that later. But this is my yes, and this is my no, and this is kind of maybe, but it's more like more information, and I don't know. So it can't be answered right now. So that actually works just fine for me. You can train your brain, because that's what you're really training, in my opinion. That's what you're really training, is your brain. And you can go through and train it. But this is really sweet. This was a gift from Miss Maureen, but you can get these on Etsy. There's all different kinds of things like this out there. You can also get printables, and that's the one thing I wanted to also show you. So this is a board with this kind of printout glued to the top of it. I love this. It's just gorgeous, period. So I like to have that decoratively set out because it's just beautiful. The other thing are these wonderful printouts. Now, these 4 that I'm going to show you are from a website called askyourpendulum.com, and you can print these out. I think you can also purchase them from them laminated. Now, I laminated 2 I'm going to show you in a minute. This is just a blank one, so you could put your own criteria. Let's say you are a book, like somebody who writes books. You could actually put different characters. You could just fill in the blanks when you have multiple choices that you want to choose from. This is one that kind of functions like this, in that you have a male, female. This is for kind of connecting with the guides, and it has the alphabet and the numbers across it. I've never used this really, or this, but I think this is a great concept, because depending on what you're using it for, like I said, if you were using it for book writing and things of that nature, or just questions that have multiple scenarios, this would be really good for that. So that's 2 that you can print out for free. Again, that is from askyourpendulum.com. And then these are the 2 that I really do like from askyourpendulum.com. This one, as you can see, is a chakra, And I'll pull it up a little closer. You can see you've got the chakra, you've got the colors here, you have some basic keywords about what that chakra is related to. And I really like this one, especially if I'm doing a chakra tarot reading, although then I would probably just do it over the tarot card. But this is much easier because otherwise you'd have to go card by card to say, okay, what is a chakra that is blocked, right? So then you can actually just, you know, this middle point is where you would want to hang your chakra, right? And again, this is just me doing this because I don't have a question right now. But I would, if I was getting ready to do a heart or chakra reading, you know, okay, well, what chakra is blocked that I need to pay attention to? And so let's say it went this way, right? Then I would say, all right, I need to pay attention to the throat chakra. Okay, if I was just saying, okay, for myself, like what is a chakra that is blocked right now? And it would go this way, which gets, you see, if the swing shows it's here, it's not going straight across. As you can see, the bottoms go up because that way it has a chance for it to actually be this one, which wouldn't be that one. So this is a really great one, and I quite like this one, and I have used this one. I did just print it out in color because I didn't have a color printer, which I have now, and then I just picked up some laminating sheets and laminated it, and on the back one is the other one that I quite like, and this one is also from the same website, and it has all of the major arcana. And so that is a handy, I don't use this one as much as this one. I like this one a lot, but I have used this and I quite like it. So, what major arcana energy do we need to focus on surrounding this situation, right? And so then if it's a death card, okay, I need to think about endings and think about ways in which there's endings and new beginnings, or, whatever it might be. So I quite like this one as well. So I just cut them out, stick them together, and then laminated it. So I just have one sheet which has both of them. So I quite like these two. Like I said, these are of the sheets that you can get on. I didn't do a great job with laminating. It's got a wrinkle in it. But out of the sheets that they have on that particular site, these are the two that I like. This is the one that I've used the most. So you can have things, and there's all kinds. If you put out pendulum, I don't know, I can't remember what I would call it, like pendulum board printouts or something like that, and then click on images, you can find all kinds of things. But these would be my favorites. These are my favorites. And I'll try to remember to put a link down there below where you can print these out, but you can print these out yourself or order one in color laminated. Let's say you don't have a printer, and they're pretty cheap too. So that's another option there. So these would be ways that you could use this. And so, yeah, this I would use before, like if, okay, there was a specific question and I wanted to know kind of what is the energy. It's almost like I pull oracle cards very often on what is the energy surrounding, like what do I need to focus on. But I could do a reading itself, and I could say, well, so let's say here I would say, okay, what is my birth card? Well, there it goes, because obviously I know my birth card. So there it goes, and it's going along the Chariot because that's my birth card. But it could be other situations, like as in, okay, instead of drawing a card of the day, what is the energy I need to focus on today? And it's going straight up and down, which is the Wheel of Fortune. So I need to move with the changes of life a little bit better, that kind of thing. So you could use it in questions, especially when you're really getting used to working with the pendulum. Having something specific like this is very helpful for you to kind of get used to it. And same thing here. This is a lot you could do with this. What is a chakra that is blocked, right? What is the chakra that I need to focus on today? What is the chakra energy that needs to be focusing on this issue? That kind of question. And then it would, you'd swing there, and then you would go ahead and work with it. And then you might pull cards on that particular, you can go into this whole thing. So that's that. For yes and no questions, again, I don't normally use a board, but you could use a board like this. But let's start with a, trying to think which one will show up the best. Probably doesn't matter. Okay, so for me, when, and I will try to, I was going to try to do this so that it could, camera angle would be better, but all you kind of get is my chest and you can't really see anything. So, you know, but you can look them up. I'll try to insert a link that shows, you know, you just kind of want to have your elbow resting on the table and you want to be hanging this. Now, some people, I think, just do it straight like this. I don't know. We all come up with our own things. For me, I do like it looped over my finger like this. So I generally loop it over my finger just like this. And, you know, when you first start, you want to just hold it down here and you want to say to yourself, what is yes? So then now it's starting to swing, and you're just going to see baby. It's not going to be ginormous. The longer you let it set, the more it will start to swing, because obviously it builds up momentum, right? And then you can say stop. What is no? Mine's back and forth. Stop. And you don't have to say this out loud. What is maybe? I don't get maybe very often. No. Or stop, I mean. What is I don't know? So those are my basic ones. And then what you generally want to do is start asking obvious questions that you know the answer to. Like, am I a boy? No. Stop. Am I a girl? Yes. And you just kind of go through questions that are really obvious and that you know the answer to practice it. Now, I've never had a problem. I mean, everybody's different. When I picked it up and asked it those, you know, what is yes, what is no, what is maybe, what is this, it just instantly went in. Now, you may have, so some people have circular motions, right? So circular motions mean this, and going counterclockwise means this, and this may be yes, and this may be no. Like, everybody can have different things. But mine always, and I know Annika or Quilfin on YouTube, she, I think, has certain pendulums that answer differently than others. But all of my pendulums work the exact same way, and they all answer the exact same, and I've never had to work at it. But I have heard that sometimes, you know, you want to, for the first week or so that you get a pendulum every day, it doesn't take long, just run through what is yes, what is no, what is maybe, what is I don't know. Or I'm not telling, because I really do think that I don't know is, well, it can be I don't know, because you may not know the answer to the question. It depends on how you're coming to pendulums with. So let's take a second to talk about that, right? So, because this question comes up in live chats a lot, especially with this looking like a spirit board, right? Everybody comes to things differently. This is a tool, right? Just the same as this tarot card is a tool, and these geomancy sticks are a tool, and, you know, I guess those are the main tools I have right next to me. You know, cards are a tool. Geomancy sticks or dice or whatever you use are a tool. Pendulums are a tool. So for me, all of these are tools. And everybody is different about what it is that they do with their tools, right? So there very well may be people who use pendulums like a spirit board to connect with either their spirit guides or people who have passed or whatever else they choose to use a pendulum or spirit board, same concept, to connect with. Because it's a tool that they can use in a variety of, I like to say a fork is a tool to be used to eat food. But I could take that fork and stab somebody in the hand, and all of a sudden that fork has been turned into a weapon, right? So it's still a fork. The fork is still there. It's just being used in different ways. So for me, what I believe, or what I use a pendulum for, is the same thing that I use to tarot cards for, or anything else for. It is simply a means for me to get out of my head. So we have the conscious mind that is answering questions based off of whatever things that it knows up there that's conscious and is aware that it's answering the questions about. When you sink into tarot readings or any other kinds of readings, you're trying to get below that. Well, I think of it as below. Everybody thinks of it in different ways. I'm trying to get deeper, right? So I want to go deeper. I want to go down where my intuition lies. I want to go down where I believe the connections to the roots of the tree that spread out for the collective unconscious, that's tapping into many people's experiences across, past, present, and future. It's tapping into that big web. So I think of the connections of people across place and time to be on a big web, and I don't think it's just a flat web. It's kind of a three-dimensionally web. And so I want to sink down into that so that I can tap into answers that aren't necessarily up there in the top of my brain, but I need to go deeper, right? Some people are going higher if they're going to connect to, say, their higher consciousness, or they're going to connect to the divine, or they're going to connect to their guides. Then they may be visually thinking higher. I'm always thinking deeper. High priestess, dig deep, dive deep, right? That's how I think. And so it's fascinating, actually, when you just look at it as a tool like that. It's fascinating when you think about, because I was very skeptical. I'm a skeptical. I know people find it hard to believe, because I also believe in magic and fae and all kinds of things, but I'm actually a skeptic. And so I think it's fascinating that you can, and you don't have to say any of these things that you say out loud, because obviously it's in your brain. You don't need to say it out loud. You can just have it in your brain. And blood flow and who knows what else, kinds of wonderful goodness, pick up vibrations and send it to have it, moving from very, very minute movements that you can't even see. Because while you may detect movements, in my hand here, whatever movements it is so minute that if you're sitting next to me looking at this, you're not going to see any movement in my hand, nor am I when I sit there and watch to try to pick up my hand, like literally swinging this like it would take to get it swinging. It doesn't do it. I think it's completely awesome. So when I say, what is yes? This one is a little one. So you can see it goes up and down. I don't tend to get like, whoa, yes. Now, sometimes I do. And that, I will say that the degree of movement, it seems for myself to be connected to the crystal. So I do prefer working with, because I have worked with necklaces and rings and these kinds of things as well. I do get stronger reactions out of crystals, because I do believe that crystals hold vibrations, and so it can amplify things. So you would think this should be my strongest one, because it's quartz, which is one of my main stones, right? This one is actually quite stronger. And I don't know if it's the facetedness. I don't know what it is. It could be the balance of them. Who knows? But I do get different ones. And I will say the obsidian, this one especially, is quite strong for me, as well as, like I said, the amethyst. And if I use the amethyst necklace, that's also quite strong for me. Now, this is also a very fine chain, so that could also be to do with it. I don't pay a whole lot of, show me yes. I get a much quicker reaction. Stop. Show me no. Now, obviously, if I don't physically, I've been working on not physically stopping it, but just saying stop in my head. Stop. Whoops, then my hand moved. Usually I will go like this and just stop the flow. It's just faster, because if it's having to go from here to switch directions, it can take a little bit longer, and I'm not an extremely patient person. But I do personally get stronger reactions from different crystals, and also sometimes depending on the situation. It's like my cards. So for me, my pendulums have voices, as well as my decks of cards. So when I look at these pendulums, they have voices to them. So generally, when I'm working on personal internal things, this is the one that I use. So this is like my deck. I have like my Margaret Peterson. This is very personal to me. I don't use it for other people for the most part. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, this is my very first pendulum, and it's got these beautiful inclusions that just feel like it's mine. This is mine, right? So I generally use that for myself. I generally use one of these. It's usually, I don't know, it goes back and forth. I usually use these to obsidian for past life readings, which is the reading that I most often use pendulum work for, is past life readings, because there's some yes and no questions like sex and not sex, but the gender, I should say, the gender of the past life, or that kind of thing, that I do like to use pendulums for. And I generally use this because I usually always have my obsidian sphere out as well, which is always on my table, but I have it like incorporated into the reading because that has to do with kind of getting clarity, diving deep and getting information. It's also very grounding. So I generally use these for past life readings, which again, and I have mine connected together, which is generally when I'm using a pendulum for other people. So they have that. I find amethyst to be very healing, and I use it a lot in terms of crystals for healing work. So if I was going to be doing more healing, kind of general healing-y work, then I would use this one. For chakras, I would use one of these two because this has the chakras right on it, which I quite like. And copper is supposed to be very good for actually working with the chakras. Now, I don't have a lot of information about this because I'm new to this kind of thing. I've had this for a while, but I just haven't sat down to really do the work. But say you were going to actually try to block or unblock a chakra, like in Reiki type work, that one of the reasons I got this for is because copper is supposed to be good for that. And so you would actually, let's say, hold this over the heart chakra, and you could find out if it was blocked or unblocked depending on which way it was going, and then you could reverse. So if it was blocked, you could, reverse the spinning of it to kind of unravel that energy and unblock it. So copper is supposed to be good for that, I have heard. And so that's what plus it was a nice, cute, little cheap one, and I picked it up. So I do think of pendulums as actually having voices much like tarot, and that I think is more to do with the crystal than anything. And so that certainly makes sense. I have certain crystals that I use for certain things, and it makes sense that I would do the same with crystal pendulums. So that is that. So the ways that's kind of, I know this is kind of an all over the place kind of just intro to pendulums, but the ways that I personally use the most pendulums are for my own self, because sometimes I can ask myself questions and I get surprising answers because there is more work for me to do on something. I gave an example of that where I had asked a question that I was going through easy questions that I knew the answers of, and I spontaneously asked a question. I'd have to watch the video back because I can't remember, but it was something along the lines of, do you think that you are essentially good? Thinking it would be an easy answer, yes, because I've done a lot of work to come to that conclusion, despite the worm of the earth syndrome that Christianity gave me, which was that I was essentially bad. And the answer was no. And it was quite surprising because I have done a lot of work intellectually saying no to that conditioning, but that conditioning is still there. And I was able to pick up on that with pendulum work. I'm sorry, Isabel does not like somebody being out in the parking lot, so she is grumbling and gruffing over there. She's quite a scary Shih Tzu. So sometimes I use this to kind of go back through. There's a quote by somebody that I cannot remember their name. It's a philosopher, And I heard about it in literature, and I wrote it down ages ago, and now I can't find the exact quote nor who said it. But I still work with it because it worked for me. Because at the time it was like, oh, so it was that idea of that when we're born, right, we come with no lenses over our eyes. As we're raised by parents, by society, get input from school, from church, from other people, from media, from, you know, movies and television and books and everything, we start to gain, we're conditioned through these different things that we see all the time, and we start to gain lenses covering our eyes. So we're not seeing directly from ourselves to the situation. We've got all these lenses that start to layer up. And that part of our job as adult human, excuse me, part of our jobs as becoming an adult and being adults is a process of removing those layers and those lenses so that we can start to see much more clearly a situation and not have those preconceived layers over our eyes that are clouding or changing or distorting the situation. I quite love that. And so there are certain things that I know because of conditioning, because of especially religious conditioning, that I know are part of how I instantly react to certain situations because of those in kind of lined in there lenses. And so even though I've worked really hard to clear a lot of those up, I know certain ones that are triggers for me. And so I will use this to sometimes go back through and kind of check in on those kind of things and make sure that I'm not kind of slipping into negative self-thinking and those kinds of things. So that's one way that I use it in a very personal way. So then that would be with this actual pendulum. So that's one way that I use pendulums. As I talked about, one of the readings that I do where I do a past life reading where I look at somebody's birth chart mostly to look at their moon, different aspects of their moon, to look into the past life that is most impacting the life that they live today. And then I do a big reading with different cards, kind of getting into more information. And usually by the time I've done the birth chart and I've gotten to the first part of the reading, I have a pretty good feeling about whether or not the past life person that we're talking about or the past life that we're focusing on was male or female. But every once in a while I'm not entirely clear, or I want to verify it, and so I often will use a pendulum for that, and some other kind of yes/no-y questions about this particular about a past life reading. And then I generally use these two pendulums, my obsidian ones. Again, with chakra readings, I do really like to either, if I've laid the cards out, so if I've done a chakra reading where I've laid a tarot card out for each of the chakras, right? And because I don't use physical reversals, I can then use a pendulum to find out if something is blocked or is unblocked. And that can give us more information about how to read that card and what maybe needs to be done about that particular chakra, right? Same thing with this, like before I was to do, or even after, I might actually lay the cards out, and then I use this to then say, okay, what is a chakra that I need to really pay attention into this reading? And it might go here, and it's okay, let's look at the throat chakra and see, okay, are there any chakras that are blocked? And it might go here. Okay, are there any other ones, here? And so you can start to answer a series of questions, and it's much easier to do it on this wheel base than it is on the cards, having to go one by one to each of the cards. So chakra readings, I would use this in conjunction with tarot cards. Because I used to do where I would kind of lay them out, but again, it was quite tedious, and then I found this, and it actually quite helps speed that process up, and it seems to be much more, for me, easier and more concise. I need to make one of these up for elements, but generally that I'm okay with, because what I'll do, so for an element, now the only deck I have out here, I usually use a smaller deck. But I'm just gonna, this is a deck I have out here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and just give an example. So if I was just gonna do just purely an elemental spread, right? You kind of want to get it so that the cards can swing. So I would lay for fire, air, water, and earth, because that's the direction that I go in. Of course, if I'm doing it this way, sometimes I'm going backwards because I'm doing it in conjunction with geomancy, but let's keep it simple for other people who aren't obsessed with geomancy. So I would lay out a card for fire, water, earth, or fire, air, earth, water, and earth. See, it's getting me confused. And then I can do the same kind of things, like what is the most important, you know, what is the focus here? What should I focus on for the answer of this question? Because it depends on the question, right? So is there an area that is blocked? You know, okay, yeah, we need to be paying attention to the mind. The mind is like, you know, really crazy. This is me swinging, right? So that, or I may say, okay, which card reflects the emotional state? Because sometimes it's not exact. Maybe sometimes the mind is ruling the emotions, right? And so, or if we're talking about a relationship, okay, what aspect, what elemental aspect is really impacting this relationship? Okay, it's the emotions, right? It's water. There's something that's out of sync in the emotional way, or the passions are not in alignment. There's a lot of questions that you can ask in a reading that incorporates both the 4 elements positions and a pendulum. And so this is a primary way that I use it. So those would be the primary ways. And then that I'm just using just depending on what I feel like using. But a lot of times it's the amethyst one. So personal, thought-provoking, going inward, I generally use this one. This is for birth chart, get in there, yes and no questions, right? Chakra, I tend to use this one or this one, but usually this one. And then the elements with a pendulum. This is one of my favorite ways to use it because I just get a lot of information. I need to stick up a pendulum / 4 element things and then allow people to ask a series of questions. And I think that would be, I use it that way, but I don't have an actual reading up there doing that type of thing. Because not everybody is keen to having pendulum work in their readings. So there we go. I have rambled on about sort of looking at pendulums, looking at some ways in which you could use boards, and some ways that I actually use pendulums. So I hope that you have found this to be in some degrees helpful or just at least thought-provoking in how you might use them. Pendulums yourself. If you have any specific questions on them, go ahead and put those in the comments. I'll do the best, and that might also help me focus in on, if any other further videos on pendulums that people might be interested in, it would help. So if you have any questions, ask them in the comments, and I will talk to you guys all tomorrow.